Welcome to our channel, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 movie flops of the last decade. For this list, we'll be looking at movies released in the past 10 years that cost a fortune to make but couldn't recoup their production and marketing costs at the box office. Aside from the numbers, we're basing our picks on just how far these movies fell below studio expectations and what their failure means for the state of cinema. Which flop do you think deserved to perform better? Let us know in the comments. People like Spider-Man, people like Star Wars. We think they still like dystopian yay adaptations. Let's throw them all together and let the money flow in. If only the formula for success was that simple. Even before the pandemic was delaying most big-budget movies, Chaos Walking was already in release window limbo as poor test screenings and reshoots spelled doom. When Chaos Walking was finally released in February 2021, 4 years after principal photography started, it felt like the film had been sent adrift on an ice floe. Nobody expected it to survive the cold critical reception. With an intake of $27.1 million against at least $100 million, the studio could only take solace in one thing: the almighty write-down. On paper, the BFG appeared to be too big to fail. It was being distributed by Disney, it was based on a cherished book by literary legend Roald Dahl, and it marked director Steven Spielberg's return to family-friendly entertainment. Unlike some of the other films on this list, the BFG also had mostly positive reviews on its side. For whatever reason, though, more people went to see The Purge, Election Year, and The Legend of Tarzan over the 4th of July weekend. Making just over $55 million in North America and $183.3 million in total, the BFG had much smaller returns than expected. Like Willy Wonka, BFG could become a cult classic someday, but it likely won't recoup its $140 million budget anytime soon. After Marvel broke records with the Avengers, DC seemed destined to do the same. Where the MCU took its time establishing its heroes, though the DCEU accelerated things to catch up. Along the way, they churned out 5 films that ranged from awesome to Suicide Squad. As if that wasn't enough to make moviegoers skeptical, Zack Snyder left during post-production due to a family tragedy with Joss Whedon stepping in. When Justice League hit theaters, it was about as tonally inconsistent and rushed as people expected. Its $658 million gross would have been passable for a middle-tier superhero movie, but for a $300 million tentpole, it didn't reach the break-even point. At least Snyder eventually got to finish his version, although measuring its profitability is tricky. The film about monster trucks that are literally monsters living inside trucks doesn't exactly scream bona fide hit. Nevertheless, we guess the idea offers a few possibilities for tie-in merchandise. Maybe this could actually turn a respectable profit with a modest budget of $25 million. The studio unwisely decided to throw $125 million at monster trucks, however. We can only assume one of the studio heads thought that this was going to be the next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Where Ninja Turtles built a fan base with comics, toys, and a cartoon, though, monster trucks went blindly charging into the fast lane without any driving experience. Grossing $64.5 million worldwide, what was intended to jumpstart a franchise instead lost an estimated $123.1 million. A couple years before Disney came along with $71 billion to burn, Fox made a last-ditch effort to prove that they could make a watchable Fantastic Four movie. Did audiences embrace Fox's gritty take on the colorful superhero team? Well, by the end of its opening weekend, the film came in second at the domestic box office to Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation, which had already been out for over a week. In North America, Fantastic Four grossed $56.1 million, which is about how much its 2005 predecessor made in its opening weekend alone. With an overall intake of $167.9 million, the film lost nearly $100 million on a budget of no less than $120 million. We guess their loss was the MCU's gain. While the previous X-Men movies had been critically hit and miss, all of them were financially successful. So when Fox gave Dark Phoenix the go-ahead, it seemed like another guaranteed blockbuster. Unfortunately, the film faced a storm of unforeseen obstacles. What was originally supposed to be a two-part movie suddenly had to be squeezed into one. Reshoots were ordered due to negative test screenings, and tweaks were allegedly also made to avoid comparison to an MCU movie. Meanwhile, Disney was in the midst of acquiring Fox, which was partially blamed for the film's poor marketing. Horrible reviews were the final nail in the coffin for Dark Phoenix, which made roughly $250 million on a $200 million budget. Reportedly, it lost $100 million in total. Until New Mutants came along and made just $49 at the box office, it was the lowest-grossing X-Men movie. Unlike the last duel, West Side Story at least managed to win over Academy voters. In terms of box office, however, the pandemic's effects were once again felt. By December 2021, audiences were starting to return to theaters, although most of them were flocking to see Spider-Man: No Way Home. West Side Story could have provided an alternative for the older crowd, although that demographic was still steering clear of theaters with Omicron on the rise. It didn't help that another adaptation of the classic musical already exists, leading many to question if a remake was necessary. Steven Spielberg hasn't lost his touch as a director, but with a gross of $76 million against $100 million, his reign as box office king may be over. With a price tag of $100 million, The Last Duel got better reviews than some other award season hopefuls. Even if you took COVID out of the equation, though, it would have been a tough sell. In addition to the uncomfortable subject matter, the film clocks in at 2.5 hours, limiting the number of potential showings and alienating those turned off by long runtimes. With older demographics still hesitant about returning to theaters, Scott's latest historical epic opened with $10.9 million, ultimately grossing about 3 times that amount. Scott pinned the blame on millennials who do not ever want to be taught anything unless you are told it on the cell phone. We love to see Scott's TikTok remake that appeals to the younger crowd. Amsterdam proved 2 things. Star power isn't what it used to be, and neither is director David O. Russell. After a lengthy hiatus, Russell returned with a star-studded revisionist history, mystery comedy, period picture, that's also a political thriller. Yeah, you can tell from this description that Amsterdam doesn't know what it wants to be. Since the film can't pick a tone, the actors struggle to unearth any chemistry. Too ambitious for its own good, Amsterdam could have used a critical boost, but reviews unsurprisingly weren't so forgiving. Costing $80 million to produce and an estimated $70 million to promote, the film got off to a disastrous $6.5 million opening weekend, with its final worldwide total amounting to $31.2 million. We're not going to act like COVID hasn't factored into more than a few recent flops. The Omicron surge didn't do this espionage ensemble piece any favors. Given the lackluster reviews, though, we're not convinced that The 355 would have been a box office success, even in a pre-pandemic world. As much as we like Jessica Chastain, Penelope Cruz, and the rest of the cast, there's only so much they can do with a forgettable script and a director who, quite frankly, is better off as a producer. Nevertheless, Universal was confident enough in the picture to pay $20 million out of Cannes. The 355 made about $7.8 million more than its distribution rights, with the budget falling between $40 million and $75 million.